Inside your bedroom, we stopped counting the days, lost in the rhythm.
Well, welcome one and all to Black Girl Love, and I am your host as always, Kat Williams. And this week on Black Girl Love, the podcast, we're going to do something a little different. I know you're like, what's different, Kat? I mean, because you just starting out, so everything's different. And that is true. That is true. But on this podcast, because I am with my mother, I thought it would be awesome to talk to her about her lived experience being a black girl who loves life. I guess that would be the easiest way to describe it, right? So I will introduce my mother, and then we're gonna ask her a few questions. Ask her a few questions because we Southern and stuff, and then we'll get into it. You ready? Let's do it.
inside your bedroom.
Alrighty, y'all, we are back with Black Girl Love, the podcast. Again, I'm your host, Kat Williams, and today's special guest, and the first time we've actually had a guest on the podcast, and that featured guest is my mother. That's right, y'all. I wasn't just walking and talking one day. I was actually birthed by this woman who is here, and her name, would you like to introduce yourself, or would you like me to say your name?
You can introduce me.
Alrighty, my mother is Deborah Cox. Everybody calls her Debbie in the family. I'm just going to refer to her as Mom, and if you're listening and if you have any comments you direct toward her, call her Deborah or Miss Cox. Either way. But don't call her Mama because that's weird. Don't you think that's a little weird? Okay, alrighty. So first off, because this was a last minute decision to do, I was like, Mom, how about you come on the podcast? And I've been traveling, so I actually haven't done one the last couple of weeks. And I wanted to get back into the groove of things, and I actually want to do it while I'm traveling, because I'll be heading out next week. So I was like, Mom, come on, and I'll ask you a couple of questions, and you can share with the world whatever story you choose to share. But one of the ones that interests me about my mom is the fact that she was one of the first African American black people of color to integrate the school system in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, which is our hometown. And, Mom, I just wanted to ask you about that, like what that experience was like integrating the public school system in Hattiesburg, Mississippi.
Hello. First of all, that was a very scary experience. Very scary. I can remember as we walked into the school, there were 6 of us that morning, that we had police escorts. And we were even afraid the police. Let alone the people. We were afraid the police. They were throwing things at us, shouting names, calling us names, the N-word and other racial slurs. But we got in the classroom, and I can remember going in classrooms and being the only black in the classroom, and all the white people would run to the corner as if to see, just to sit by me would cause a problem. I had gotten so bad that we had to sit alphabetically. And I was sitting behind this guy, and he was really, really nice to me. And that was one of the first whites that I met that wasn't real bad. There several things happened that couple of years over there. We had to play baseball. Nobody wanted to pick me for that team. We were the last picked, and the person that got me wasn't a happy camper. We played in the band, and I think shortly after that, people began to buy their own instruments because the school had instruments, and parents didn't want their kids playing on an instrument that a black child had played on. But what I noticed was at the school, first of all, when I first got there, we were talking about separate but equal. And things were so unequal there. I can remember at the school I came from, we had health class in the gym while the boys practiced basketball. And while they were having gym class. And these kids had science rooms with animals and things in jars. And they had a health room and a biology. I mean, they had all the tools and stuff, which was amazing to me. That the things that they had, we didn't have. We had health, and I think we just read out the book, and that's basically what it was. I don't know if the lady even majored in health. She just taught us health. out the book, prayer word for word, verbatim. Uh, that was kind of scary too. Um, that but and then what happened too? Where the people called themselves sending the kids that were intellectual to the schools, to the white schools, because we had freedom of choice in '64, and we were smart, yeah, at our schools. When we got to their schools, we were not smart, and that became very depressing. Not only were you a foreigner in that land, you didn't know what they knew. It was like speaking a different language.
And how old were you when you integrated?
I was in the 8th grade, so I think I was like 13 or 14.
So basically, you were at the developmental part of your life, and then you were stuck into this mess. Let's be honest, it was a mess.
Yes, it
and
was.
so, right when at the point where you should have been, basically heading down the pathway where you're gonna be on for life, maybe you were detoured. Would that
Yes.
be the easiest way to say
Yes, yes, it was. And then home life was not that great. So I was coming from a broken home with an abusive father, being thrown into this situation. So those years for me were not the best years to me. There was some bad times during those years. There were so many episodes things that happened to us, and I can remember this young lady that was in the bathroom with me one day, just she and I, and she was talking so nice to me, and I thought, wow, this is a good person. She's gonna be really, she talks to me like a person, and we were just talking about this and that, and she asked me, and she said, real nice and sweet, would you show me your tail? And I was taken aback because I couldn't know I didn't know what she was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
She thought that we had tails like monkeys. I tried to let her know I did not have a tail. And a lot of stuff like that happened. We and it was in the early '60s, and we were marching and protesting and integrating and trying to do a lot of stuff. But there were some very painful moments there. Some people got killed. Some got feelings hurt. But the sports part about it. We had 2 boys at our school who played really, really good football. They were great at football. And the white people accepted them, and they were all right. It was just the girls who were not okay. If you couldn't play football, you weren't washing dishes, we don't need you. That's just the way it came to us.
So, was there any repercussions from that time frame? Like the 6 people that you mentioned, did everybody have a great life with this integration? Or, I mean, because you got to compare it to those who weren't integrated, and how they went forth with their life. How do you think yours turned out because of this?
Well, there were only 2 girls, me and another girl, and she passed away at an early age. So, and one of the guys, the football players, he's not doing really good. He's not doing. Last time I saw him, he had some mental issues, I believe, some health issues, some things going on with him. One of the guys is doing great for a minute, and then he became criminal. So, and another 2 guys, one moved away, and one I lost touch with. But the girl, she and I became like soulmates. She was my sister, my best friend, because we were all we had. It was us against 300 white girls, and so we were all we had over there. Yes, things became bad as a result. My life didn't go as I planned for it to go. You know what happened to me over there, and I'm just talking off my head now, talking out loud. I think because they put me over there, and I'm dark-skinned, because I'm a chocolate person, and I'm this white girl with this long blonde hair, and my self-esteem became very low.
I can see that. I mean, that happens in an everyday school setting. So I can only imagine in a school setting where you're the only or one of 2 onlys, and it's racist and it's acknowledged racist, and they don't want you there. So I'm assuming the strain and stress of all that. So you said you came from a broken home. What did your mom say about all of this? My grandmother, by the way.
I never told her because she was so proud of me. I had been chosen. I was one of the chosen ones, and that made her very proud. So not discourage her, you know. In fact, I'm the oldest of 8 kids, and she was going through her own battles at that time. So this was a battle I had to fight alone without my mother. I didn't have a father, so I did it by myself.
So what about the other 6? I mean, outside the ones who are dead, did you all like collectively hang out at school after school? I mean, you said 8th grade. At what point did other black kids come into the school system with you?
They came in like the 9th and 10th grade. More came in the 9th grade. In the 10th grade, I think by the 11th grade, we had to integrate then. You went to school you were nearby, so eventually came in. Yes, and to this day, one of those guys and I, Reverend Fairley, we still friends, to this day. And you know about the thing, they didn't care at the school if we left or not. We didn't have to check out. If we all decided by second period we just can't take this today, and we walked out, nobody cared, except for the football players. They wanted them to stay.
Got it. So basically, they wanted our bodies for physical gain, but that was about it. But they didn't want mentally. And then you were already, like you said, behind because it was separate, but it definitely wasn't equal in the education system and the tools that you were handed. That's deep. I'm imagining walking into a classroom and you're realistically thinking that you're smart, and then you realize that you're like 3 years behind the dumbest kid in the class.
And the blackest.
Right.
And the least wanted.
All right.
And even the teachers were very racist during the 60s. Very, very racist. I can remember our principal. He did not say the Negro. He didn't say the nigger. He said it the Negra. He made Negro proper, the Negra. And he got at a speech thing one day at a assembly we had, and he said to the people there, "I want you all to treat my Negroes better." I'll never forget him saying that.
And that's deep. That's deep, y'all. Woo! Okay, welcome to Hattiesburg, Mississippi, 1964. My mother, again, was one of the first black people to integrate the school system in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. First 6, and, it was not positive. Was any part of it positive, you think?
I can't think of anything that was positive other than we all wanted to have long blonde hair. And I can remember us girls, we didn't know. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to find something positive in this.
If there's nothing there, ain't nothing there. Don't worry about it. You can't find.
Toward the end, I think, toward the second, maybe third, fourth year, the kids became better. Kids are taught to hate. And we got to know each other and become friends and get likes and dislikes. Even if we didn't play football. And toward the end of our terms, things got much better. We became associates. I'm not gonna use the word friends, but we got along.
Okay. Well, you heard it here first. First telling of her story when it comes to integrating the public school system in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and that is my mother, Deborah Cox, and I am Kat Williams, and this is Black Girl Love, the podcast, and that was our first segment. Black. Next, we're going into girl. Hang with us. Welcome back to Black Girl Love, the podcast. I am your host, Kat Williams, and this week's special guest is my mother, the one and only, the incomparable, the astounding, and always, Deborah Cox. And so I asked her, I was like, Mom, what do you want to talk about on this podcast that you're a part of? And she was like, what's a podcast? And I get that question too. That makes a lot of sense. What is a podcast? And I apologize for all the background noise, y'all. We are doing it basement style, and I like it. But anyway, so we've talked about her integrating the public school system in Mississippi in 1964 in the 8th grade and the trials and tribulations with that. But I was like, what else do you want to talk about? Your childhood. I mean, it's an interesting story if you lead with just that alone, but there's much, much more. My mother is the oldest of 8 children. How is it, or how was it, or 9? Is it 9? I was wrong. You said 8 while ago,
That was
so I was
sister
just going.
dead. Mm-hmm.
So she's the oldest of 9. And how was that for you? Being the oldest child in Mississippi, being darker hued, being a female, how was that in a broken family in Mississippi?
That too was another scary situation. That was another scary situation. Back in those days, back in the 50s and the 60s, not a lot of people were broken up. Some fathers stayed with their families. Mine had an alcohol problem. And even he was there, he wasn't there. So, my mom, though, did the very best she could. She raised us to the best of her ability. She did what she knew how to do, which was awesome. She did a great job. But I was the oldest. And we were not poor. We were, they say, we were poor. We had nothing. My mother sewed. She did hair. She worked in kitchens. She was a maid. She did whatever she could for us to make it because, as I said, my father was an alcoholic. The pay was not great during that time. And he worked for these white people, and they paid him every day. He was a really good mechanic, and he could really fix cars, and he fixed them quick. In fact, they called him lightning. And the people who had bought cars to this place only wanted him to fix their cars, and they had to keep him happy, so they paid him. He was drunk on the job. He was drunk fixing cars. So that when Friday came, he had no money
Because he got paid every day.
because they paid him every day.
And I want to make a point here that your father, my grandfather, was he in one of the war? He was in the Korean War. Correct?
He was in the Korean War.
And technically, if you want to be honest, do you think that he had some PTSD from being that way? In that war?
Knowing what I do about PTSD now, I think he did. But 70 years ago, no one was diagnosing it as that. That he was either crazy or an alcoholic. Now, my father was a country boy, raised in a small town, a community, not even a town, called Rose Hill, Mississippi. And they took him, so to speak, out behind the plow and put him behind the gun on the front line, and of course he developed some issues.
Right. So I mean, and I'm only saying that because we've actually been talking about your father recently, and just correlating it to my time in the military and the people that I know who have been in the military who have come back a little damaged, especially if there's a war involved or any kind of conflict where you can see somebody getting killed, or you got injured or anything like that. So we're going to give him grace for that, but still acknowledge that when he came back, things weren't right for your family, with him being the head of the family.
They were not right. And not only were they not right, but women in that era were not like black women are today. Very, very submissive, my mother was. But as she grew older, she became wiser. So I want to guess with age comes wisdom. My father would, like I said, it's 8 of us by him, but there's one she remarried. She would get pregnant all the time by him. And it would just, by me being the oldest one, it would just really make me so mad at her. So I spent a lot of my childhood mad at her for getting pregnant. Why are you doing this? You can't feed the ones that are here. And I had a very traumatic experience because of her last pregnancy. Not the last one, but I have a sister that died as a baby. And I may have been 11th to 12th grade. And at that age, what sex is. And you think mom shouldn't be doing that anyway, let alone getting pregnant. And she did. And it made me so very, very mad, Anandra. I talked mean to her. I told her I wished the baby would die. I prayed for the baby to die. I had what, she had to work. And when she had to work, that meant I had to step up. There were so many things after school that I couldn't do. There are so many things that I couldn't go to, functions I couldn't attend because we were not able to buy me dresses or clothes to wear this stuff like that. And another baby, I can't believe it. And that's where I was, and the baby died. And not knowing the things that I know today, I had convinced myself that I was the reason the little girl died. And that was a dark day for me. Today, I've forgiven myself. I know I'm not the reason for that, but I thought that for some times. And although I have 3 children, they were gifts from God, and I did the best that I could do with mine too, being a single mom for all of their lives. Life in the South, just in the 50s, just was not easy for anybody. Okay, I lived with my uncle and his wife, he was my daddy's uncle, and we struggled. You did. We struggled. My mom, sometimes she couldn't work because she was pregnant, and then my uncle and them only got a check every month. It wasn't a whole lot. And things were so bad back in them that the white people, I just don't want to keep saying what happened then, but they robbed older black people. They robbed them.
Right.
They worked for nothing. I can remember my uncle and them had bought a couch from this furniture store, and they couldn't read or write. So every month, on the first of the month, the man would come and collect the money. And he had been coming for half of my childhood. I'm like, ain't this couch paid for yet? And we looked at the receipts, and the man just writing down, 1 week you owe me $5, next week you owe me $35. You paid it $5, now you owe me $35. And they were just taking their money like that.
They were doing that to a lot of people. They weren't even the exception.
Right, they were doing it to a lot of people back in those days, a lot of people.
They're still doing it. We just call it different things now. We call it credit.
Yeah, credit. Easy credit ripoff.
Right. Running center. Same thing. We just call it a different thing, but it's the same thing. Mm-hmm. I hope that you've given yourself grace in regards to your sister passing and your mother, And my grandmother, who I absolutely adore, Luana Rollins was her name, was a great woman. Yes, my grandmother was a great woman, and we're going to talk about her in our next segment. So, again, stay tuned to Black Girl Love, the podcast, as we talk about love and what that means for my mother. All right, to y'all, this is Kat Williams, and this is Black Girl Love, the podcast, and we are back for the third and final segment of this week's episode, which is our 11th episode, and we are doing real good. And so, again, this week's guest is my lovely mother, Deborah Cox, and she's talking about her life and her journey, and this is only a small segment of that. So please, let's not get it confused, let's not get it twisted, and let's not cut and paste anything from the podcast and run with it, because that's called gossip, and we don't gossip here. We tell the truth. And with that truth, let's talk about your mother, my grandmother, Luana Rollins, and other strong black women in your life. Because I know we've talked about your struggles so far, integrating it in the 8th grade, and then being the oldest child of 9. Let's talk about the women around you.
Okay, my mother, as I said, was a very strong woman, did the best she could with what she had. Raised by a lady who only had 1 child, and they didn't know a whole lot other than to be submissive to the black man and the white man also. Now, on the other hand, I have a grandmother, Maddie Anderson Newsom. She had the first black cosmetology school for black women in Mississippi. And so there was a black woman in my family that was very, very strong. So Kat comes from strong women. My aunt was an elderly lady, but she was very, very strong. She took in my mother and 6 kids. And she never had a child, so that took a lot. And she was in her 50s when this happened, so a very, very strong lady. And without her, I don't know how we would have made it some days. I can remember her doing all that she could to make sure we ate and had things to put on our back. And my mother, as I say, was a seamstress. She did hair. I can remember her going to this white lady that she used to work for. The lady was, obese, and she would give my mama her clothes. And back in those days, pleats were in style, the wide skirts, and she would take those. My mom would come in and take those and take them apart and take those little skirts and tops and things and make clothes for me and my sister. We went to school looking nice all the time. My mother made us stuff. When dashikis came out, she made dashikis. When Nehrus came out, she made Nehrus. When hammer pants came out, she made hammer pants. She made it. And she did hair. She was a kitchen titian on the side. So we come from a long line of strong black women. I have survived. My daughter Kat is a strong woman. Very, very proud of her. Very proud of my daughter. I love her to death. So proud of her accomplishments in life. She's doing things that I wish I could have done and were not able to. So she's living my dream, my mother's dream, my grandmother's dream, and my great-grandmother's dream. She's living all our dreams.
So thank you for that. But speaking of your mother, who is the only grandmother that I really know and was raised with, her mother died young, right? So she never was really raised by her mother. And you have an amazing array of sisters that are currently on this earth right now who helped raise me, my Aunt Doris, my Aunt Peaches, a.k.a. Mary, my Aunt Sandra, and then I have a little auntie who's younger than me, so we're not going to give her no credit, but we're going to shout her out, hey Kim, because I know you're going to be listening, and stuff like that. So I think, Mama, when I talk about my family and I talk about the South, and people always ask me, what do I want? What would I repeat? I love being from the South. What about you? Do you think your life would have been better or different if you had been, say, raised in Chicago or Detroit? Because the great migration that black people went on instead of your family staying in Mississippi?
No, it just would have been a different climate, same people. I don't think it would have been any different, no. Because there was a lot of racism in the 60s in Chicago.
Right.
There's racism in Chicago today.
Right.
Just like it is in Mississippi, but at home we recognize it.
Right.
It's hidden in Chicago, and I'd rather be where I know where it is than have to look for it.
Yeah, I think back, like I said, as a child, and there were so many things, and I was fortunate enough to spend quite a few years with my grandmother before she passed, so I'm thankful for that. And I hate that I didn't meet any of my mother's grandmothers and great aunts and stuff, the ones who helped make her into the black woman that she is today. But I know they're amazing because I was witness to my grandmother and I witnessed my mother, who has done quite a bit in her life. It's been a trial and a journey, and we're going to talk about that on another podcast, but not today. We just wanted to highlight a few things, and I just want to say thank you to my mother. This is our birth month. This is May. I always say that I was a birthday present to my mom, which was basically 6 days after her birth. On May 14th, I was born on May 20th, and she told me the tale of my birth on my birthday. And Mom, if you don't mind, if you could tell the world about how I was born and what happened on that day.
Okay, world, here's her birth story.
It's beautiful.
I was in labor, and we lived in a project. And everybody in the project was saying she hasn't dropped. And my mother was fussing because she had found the vitamins that I hadn't taken, and that's why I was hurting. Now, she's had, 8 kids by this time,
right.
But I'm hurting because I haven't taken my vitamins. And she ran a tub of water, get in the tub, soak. I put one foot in the tub, and I couldn't do it. I got back out. And my sister, who had her baby exactly 2 months later, July 20th, and my mother was walking through the house, fussing, and my sister, who today is a retired nurse, I was laying on the bed, we had twin beds in our room. I'm on the one bed crying in pain, and my other sister on her bed crying in anticipation of the pain that she was going to have
right.
a couple months later. And my sister, the nurse, she straddled me. She said to me, we're going to get this, we're going to make it drop. And she pulled on my stomach till she dropped. When we went, so my mama finally took me to the doctor that same, by 2 o'clock that afternoon. And when I got there and got on the table, the man said, take her to the hospital. She's about to give birth. And so we got to the hospital. They had the chair waiting on me at the light. Because the clinic was across the street from the hospital way back in that year. And then they had the stretcher at the door. That's when I got on the stretcher. And they had my legs all up in the air. And I remember the lady said, nurse said, I see a little black head. And that's all I can tell you all. I passed out after that.
And that was the end of that story.
That was the end of that. But then I had the most prettiest little girl, the beautifulest little girl in the whole wide world.
Yep. And so I asked my mom to share that story, and I'm glad I got it on tape, and so that I can have it for future. I don't have any children. My mom had me at 19. Her mother had her at 19. I won't say that I broke the cycle. I'll just say that I paused it for us, because other people in my family, of course, have children, and I have a slew of nieces and nephews. My mom is a great grandmother at this point in life. She don't need a kid from me, so we good on that regard. But I just want to thank you again, Mom, for coming on to the Black Girl Love podcast.
Welcome. You're welcome.
And I hope everybody in the listening audience enjoyed my mom's story about her life. A little portion of it. Again, she's going to come back.
Just a little portion.
Yeah, she's going to come back and tell her story. And that's an interesting story. And we're going to give her some grace to do that in the future. I am Kat Williams. This is Black Girl Love, the podcast. See you next week, y'all. Peace and love.
Inside your bedroom, we stopped counting the days lost in the